There is something strange about risk. The market can remain the same. The setup can remain the same. The probability can remain the same. And yet, the trade can suddenly feel completely different. Yesterday, you saw an opportunity. Today, you see danger. Yesterday, the same amount of risk felt acceptable. Today, it feels enormous. So what changed? The market? Maybe. But sometimes, the thing that changed was the mind looking at it. Welcome back. This is episode 3 of TMOS. In episode 1, we introduced the psychological drawdown curve. The idea that repeated losses can gradually alter the system making your decisions, long before the damage becomes obvious on the chart. Then episode 2 took us one layer deeper. Emotional residue. Because a trade can end, while something from that trade continues inside you. The position closes. The chart moves on. The money is won or lost. But the experience can remain. And now we have to ask the next question. What does that residue actually change? It can change something more fundamental than your mood. It can change what your brain believes is dangerous. And that creates a strange problem. The market does not always have to change for your perception of risk to change. That is risk perception distortion. The distance between the risk that exists and the risk your mind believes exists. And that distance can quietly determine what you do next. Your brain was not designed for trading. It was shaped in environments where uncertainty could have immediate consequences. A sound in the darkness, a sudden movement, something approaching, something disappearing. The brain had to make rapid judgments. Safe or dangerous, move or stay, act or avoid. That system helped humans survive. But trading creates a very different environment. There is no predator, no physical threat, no immediate danger to your body. There is a screen, a price, a probability, and uncertainty. Yet your nervous system can still react intensely when money moves against you. That is where the problem begins. Because your brain does not experience risk as a number. It experiences risk as significance, as uncertainty, as memory, as anticipation, as emotion. And those things can change, even when the objective conditions haven't changed very much. Think about a simple example. Your system tells you to risk 1%. You know your position size. You know your stop. You know your setup. You know that losses are part of the system. Then you lose. And then you lose again. The next valid setup appears. Nothing about your rules has changed. But suddenly, 1% feels different. You hesitate. You reduce the position. Maybe you skip the trade. Now stop for a moment. Did the mathematical risk change? Or did the meaning of that risk change inside you? That distinction is everything. Because actual risk and perceived risk are not the same thing. Actual risk is what the trade objectively contains. Position size, stop distance, probability, expected loss, expected reward, market conditions, the statistical behavior of your strategy. Perceived risk is how dangerous all of that feels right now. And perceived risk is influenced by things that have nothing to do with the chart itself. Recent losses, recent wins, fear, confidence, excitement, stress, memory, and emotional residue. Actual risk asks, what does this trade contain? Perceived risk asks, what does this trade feel like? And when those two answers drift apart, your behavior can drift with them. One of the forces behind this is loss aversion. Losses tend to carry more psychological weight than equivalent gains. A gain can feel satisfying, but a loss can feel urgent. It demands attention. It can remain in memory. It can create a powerful desire to prevent the next one. And that creates one of trading's cruelest reversals. The trader becomes so determined to avoid a small loss that they become willing to tolerate a much larger one. The stop gets moved, then moved again. The trader waits, hopes, reinterprets, and tells themselves, it might come back. But beneath the explanation, something else may be happening. The trader is no longer managing market risk. They are managing the pain of being wrong. The objective risk was defined when the trade began, but emotional risk has now taken over. And once that happens, The stop is no longer protecting the account. It is protecting the ego. But distortion doesn't only happen after losses. It can happen after wins. Imagine 5 winning trades, then 6. The trader becomes comfortable. The market starts to feel familiar. Risk becomes less emotionally visible. And that creates another trap. When danger feels familiar, it can become invisible. Position size increases. Standards loosen. A marginal setup begins to look obvious. A trade that would have been rejected last week suddenly feels completely reasonable. Why? Because nothing inside the trader is screaming danger. But the absence of fear is not proof of safety. Confidence is not probability. Familiarity is not certainty. And comfort is not risk management. This is one of the most important distinctions in TMOS. A trade can feel safe without being low risk, and a trade can feel dangerous without being objectively high risk. Now at recency, the brain naturally gives recent experiences psychological weight. So imagine 3 losses. Not catastrophic losses, just 3 losses. Your strategy is still intact. Your rules are still intact. The next setup appears. The system says, valid, but your mind remembers. The last one, and the one before that, and the one before that. Now something strange happens. The new trade begins carrying the emotional weight of the old trades. The market is presenting a new event, but your brain is partially responding to an old one. The setup hasn't necessarily become more dangerous. Your memory has simply made danger feel closer. That is distortion. You are no longer responding only to what is happening. You are also responding to what happened recently. And the reverse can be just as dangerous. 5 wins. Everything is working. Your confidence rises. Uncertainty becomes less noticeable. The next setup appears. And suddenly risk feels smaller than it really is. You enter earlier. Increase size. Relax a condition. Take a setup that doesn't quite qualify. Maybe it works. And that is even more dangerous. Because now the brain receives confirmation. It learns. That was fine. The behavior gets reinforced. And the next time, the boundary moves again. This is how perception drifts. Not usually through one dramatic decision, but through tiny changes in what feels acceptable. A little more size. A little less hesitation. A little wider stop. A little weaker setup. A little more confidence. A little less attention. Until eventually, the trader is no longer operating the same system they started with. The rules may still exist on paper, but the person executing them has changed. And this is why risk perception distortion is so difficult to catch. It rarely feels irrational. It sounds reasonable. This market is dangerous. I'll wait for a better entry. I don't want to give back today's profit. I'll reduce the size just this once. I'll give the trade a little more room. I've been winning lately. Each thought can sound logical, but sometimes the explanation comes after the emotion. The brain feels something first, and then builds a story that makes the feeling sound like analysis. That is the trap, because your edge can remain stable, while your perception keeps moving. Your statistics can remain stable, while your confidence rises and falls. Your rules can remain stable, while your willingness to follow them changes. And now we reach the real problem. Your strategy is supposed to be the decision system, but perception can quietly become the filter sitting between the strategy and your behavior. After a loss, risk can feel larger than it is, so you hesitate. After a win, risk can feel smaller than it is, so you become aggressive. When the market feels calm, risk can disappear from attention, so you overtrade. When the market becomes volatile, risk can become psychologically enormous, so you freeze. The numbers may not have moved nearly as much as your internal interpretation of them. And this is where episode 2 connects directly into episode 3. Emotional residue doesn't need to tell you, take this trade, or don't take this trade. It can do something more subtle. It can change what the trade looks like to you. It can change the emotional meaning of uncertainty. Yesterday's loss can make today's setup look dangerous. Yesterday's win can make today's setup look safe. The residue does not have to control the decision directly. It only needs to change the lens through which you see the decision. And suddenly, the chain becomes visible. Loss, pain, residue, distorted perception, changed behavior, new outcome, more pain, more residue, and the cycle begins again. This is the psychological drawdown curve moving forward through the system, not just as emotion, but as perception, and eventually, as behavior. So how do you protect the system? Not by becoming emotionless. That is impossible, and it isn't the objective. The objective is to stop emotion from rewriting the rules. First, define your risk before the market has a chance to negotiate with you. Know your position size. Know your maximum loss. Know where the trade becomes invalid. Know the conditions that make the setup valid. And know what your system has historically produced. Make those decisions before you are emotionally involved. Because once money is at risk, you are no longer observing the trade from the outside. You are inside the experience. And inside the experience, everything can feel more important. Second, learn to separate discomfort from danger. This may be one of the most important distinctions a trader can develop. A valid trade can feel uncomfortable. A terrible trade can feel comfortable. Fear does not automatically mean, don't take the trade. Confidence does not automatically mean, take the trade. So when you feel yourself pulling toward, or away from, a setup, stop. Ask, am I responding to the actual risk, or to recent pain? Then, has the edge changed, or has my emotional state changed? And finally, if I had no position, no recent win, and no recent loss, would I evaluate this setup the same way? That question is powerful because it separates the present from the emotional history attached to it. Third, keep risks small enough that ordinary uncertainty does not become psychological threat. Small risk does not guarantee success, but controlled risk reduces the chance that one outcome becomes emotionally large enough to rewrite the next decision. When one trade cannot define your emotional state, one trade has less power to control your next trade. Fourth, learn the actual distribution of your strategy, not someone else's. Yours. Your win rate, your average win, your average loss, your drawdown, your losing streaks, your recovery periods, your range of normal outcomes. Because when you know what randomness can legitimately produce, a painful sequence becomes easier to interpret. You stop asking, what is wrong? And begin asking, is this still within the range my system can produce? That is a completely different relationship with uncertainty. And finally, remember this, a feeling can be real without being accurate. Fear can be real. Excitement can be real. Confidence can be real. Pain can be real. But none of those feelings automatically tell you what the market is actually doing. Your emotions are information about your internal state. They are not a replacement for the system. And once you understand that, you can begin separating two things that traders constantly confuse: what the market is doing and what the market is making you feel. Now look at the system we have built so far. Episode 1. The psychological drawdown curve. Losses can gradually alter the operating system. Episode 2. Emotional residue. The trade can end, but its psychological effects can remain. Episode 3. Risk perception distortion. That residue can alter the way danger itself is perceived. And now, the chain becomes visible. Loss creates pain. Pain leaves residue. Residue changes perception. Distorted perception changes behavior. Behavior creates new outcomes. And those outcomes feed the next cycle. This is why a trader can have a good strategy, good statistics, good risk management, and still repeatedly sabotage execution. The edge isn't necessarily broken. The trader's relationship with the edge is changing. But there is still one problem, a much deeper one. Because what happens when you can actually recognize the distortion? What happens when you know you're afraid? You know the risk is objectively small. You know the setup is valid. You know the statistics. You know the position size. You know where the stop belongs. You know exactly what your system requires. And yet, you still do the opposite. You know the rule and break it. You know the stop and move it. You know the setup. And hesitate. You know the position size. And increase it. You know what the system says. And somehow, another decision comes out. So now we have a different question. Maybe the problem isn't that you don't know enough. Maybe the problem isn't even that you don't care enough. Maybe we have misunderstood discipline itself. Because there is an illusion hiding inside the word discipline. The belief that knowing the right decision means you will execute the right decision when the moment becomes emotionally expensive. But knowledge and behavior are not the same system. And somewhere between the decision you understand and the decision you actually make, something changes. Something takes control. Something you may have spent years calling a lack of discipline. At TMOS, we call that the discipline illusion. And once you see it, you may never look at your own discipline the same way again. Because the hardest question isn't, do you know what to do? The harder question is, who is actually making the decision when it matters most? Next framework, TMOS F004, the discipline illusion. If you already know what to do, why do you still do the opposite? TMOS, understand the system, master the decision,